Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 31st, 2020 online gathering of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Hendersonville, North Carolina. If we haven't met yet or you're visiting with us, my name is Don Rollins. Proudly serve the congregation as their accredited interim minister. My pronouns are he and him. As I mentioned this week, if you're interested in learning more about the congregation, visit uufnc.org. And to learn more about our large denomination, go to uua.org. 3 announcements before we begin today's service. First, for those who'd like to share in the Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Stones of Compassion and or Beloved Conversation discussions, follow the Zoom link that is contained in the email notice that should have been sent out yesterday. Keep in mind those parts will not be recorded. Second, you're invited to join us for the next installment of Wonderful Wednesday. That'll be on June 3rd. The idea is to have a midweek program for UUFH folks to stay in touch and do some sharing. We'll begin with the virtual supper for those who would like at 5:30. And then we'll move into a short Vesper service or a probing question at 6:15. I'll provide some music and readings and stories, and you'll receive a separate announcement and Zoom link the day before that program as well. So join us for a midweek booster in these difficult times. As I always say, now make yourselves comfortable as we enter this time together. Watch the video in total, pause it, come back later, even multitask, because the goal here is to help you think, to help you laugh, invite you to touch a deep place and go forth until we meet again. So this is your time. Do with it as you need. My wife, Mary, will be lighting today's chalice, and we light it in the memory of George Floyd, who was killed by a member of the Minneapolis Police Department this week. We hold to our hearts those who were closest to him. We hope the events that are following his death will turn peaceful, that the work of racial justice and anti-oppression may begin. And for us, let's commit to using our power and privilege to resist the forces of evil.
Hi. I'd like to share a story with you today of my growing up in Greer, South Carolina, just down the road. This was pre-BMW, and it was a typical small southern town. It was very divided racially. Um, and when I was in second grade, this was 1972, I had no clue that the schools had only been integrated for a few short years. To me, that's all I knew. Uh, so it wasn't a surprise to any of us in our classroom when Ben and Scott were best friends. Ben and Scott loved the same things. If you asked them why they were best friends, they said that it was because they were so alike. They loved G.I. Joe, they loved to play in the mud, and every recess, they were together all the time. Um, what we didn't think about was that Ben was black and Scott was white. And on top of that, Scott suffered from what would come to be known as Asperger's. So all we knew was that Scott acted a little different. Um, and we all knew that their friendship was something that was really special. And a lot of us looked on it with a little bit of envy because they were in their own world with each other all the time that they could be, laughing and talking. As they got older and we moved through school together, because in a small town, you go through school from first grade all the way to graduation together. And they started to move apart as they got into fourth grade and fifth grade. And we all started to realize that they were not as alike as they thought they were. They didn't spend as much time together. They had other interests. In high school, something amazing happened. Scott, we never knew that there was anything especially different about him. We didn't categorize him. In other words, he was just Scott. He was a little odd, but we were teenagers. We were all a little odd. So we didn't think anything about it. Scott and Ben were in the same English class that I was in 10th grade. And we had a project that we had to do in pairs, and they were paired up. They hadn't been in that many classes together for just luck of the draw in a few years. But they reconnected over that project. And I saw something that was really amazing happening, which was they started talking about when they were friends when they were young and all of the things they liked to do together. And they reestablished that bond of, we may be different, but we're still the same in so many ways. Even then, as a self-absorbed teenager, I knew that there was something really special about that. And I think a lot of other people in that class did too. I like to think so. When I think back on that, what I remember is what they discovered again, which is that we really are more alike than we are different if we look for those ways that we are alike and we support each other. And I think that was one of the basic alikenesses that they had, was that even though Scott didn't communicate verbally as well as a lot of us, Ben was quiet and took the time to understand him. He took the time. And I think what I would like to do in my own life is remember to try and take the time to understand other people, where they are, who they are, and to try to see the ways that we're alike instead of all the ways that we're different. Thank you.
When I started ministry with Unitarian Universalists, I was just a few years ago, of course. But when I started, I was serving a large congregation in the Midwest. The congregation was pretty isolated from what happened downtown in that city. And so in order to get from the church on downtown, there was a bus, of course, number 32 bus. And when I would take that bus, I always met new people and got new stories, which helped me get new songs. One of the people who I saw fairly regularly, I just called the Pilgrim. I'd really forget his name at this point. An African-American man who did an awful lot of work for people out in the suburbs, but really was a blues player at heart. And so as I got to know him, he might have stopped by a bar or two where I was playing music, and so we had a chance to talk. And by just listening to him, getting his story, I was reminded of what it takes for some people to be in the world, how difficult it can be just to stand up in the morning and be about your life, because he would share that story with me. So here's a song called Pilgrim, and it's written for him. Cowboy shirt and old work pants, John Wayne walking a Bogart stance. He's a June breeze, and he's just passing through. An old hands round an old guitar, corner up, corner bar, singing every song he ever knew. He's a brother and he's a friend. He's a little lost, he's a little thin. Somehow he just gets along. He's a pilgrim in gumshoes, singing lonesome three-chord blues. Hey pilgrim, won't you sing us one last song? He can't hold to a dollar bill, never could, probably never will, but he says it ain't no crime just living poor. And money makes this old world go round, and it's who you know that makes you count. He says, well, I don't count for much, that's for sure. And he's a brother and he's a friend. He's a little lost, he's a little thin, but somehow he just gets along. And he's my pilgrim in gumshoes, singing lonesome three-chord blues. Hey pilgrim, won't you sing us one last song? He says it ain't all that bad. You can't miss what you never had, and at least nobody can take your name from you. And then he wipes a tear on that dirty sleeve, and he shakes my hand and starts to leave. He's a June breeze, and he's just passing through. He's my brother, and he's my friend. He's a little lost, and he's a little thin, but somehow he just gets along. Whoa, and he's a pilgrim in gumshoes, singing lonesome three-chord blues. Pilgrim, won't you sing us one last song? Pilgrim, won't you sing us one last song? Selena Gomez, Kurt Cobain, Ben Stiller, Billie Holiday, Beethoven, Abbie Hoffman, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Anne Sexton, Hemingway. Here's the text for this homily. It's taken from the book of Whoopi Goldberg, chapter 1, verse 3. Simply says, normal is just a setting on a washing machine. I love that quote. I love the idea of suspending our puritanical rushes to judgment to bring comfort to one tribe at the expense of another. And to borrow from another bard, Robert Zimmerman, I love it that Whoopi calls us out for criticizing people, things, and ideas we don't even understand. So today is the final day of Mental Health Awareness Month 2020. Begun in 1949 by a coalition of mental health agencies, the goal is to promote deep understanding of all those affected by mental challenges. It's a month given to education and solidarity and advocacy. But it's also a time for expanding minds, exploding preconceptions about who and what constitutes normal. You know, excuse me, in a perfect world, this month would not exist. For in that world, we not only accept the reality of different ableness, we'd also embrace and celebrate that diversity. In that perfect world, government would partner with for and nonprofits in seeing to the financial and the service needs to those who, no matter someone's ableness. In that world, children would grow up free from the crushing ignorance and fear that permeates today's world. Schools from pre-K to doctoral programs would be versed in accommodating the educational needs and abilities of every learner. Religion would be shot through with a universalist theology in which every soul is a reflection of God or the source of life. And in that world, parents and caregivers of those considered otherly or abnormal would be held in the holy grasp of true community and true affirmation. But I don't have to tell you, this is not our world. In this world, funding, services, and research were far down the list of priorities before the coronavirus. And despite a recent Kaiser Family Foundation poll indicating over half of us are struggling with our mental health needs during the virus, there remains no robust plan to help relieve that suffering. Let's talk about this world then. In this world, although today's children with additional needs are not saddled with anywhere near the disgust and the fear that was so prevalent in my prehistoric times, safe space for these kids cannot be assumed in this world. In this world, learning is overall still a maze for non-mainstream children, teens, and adults. They're left to navigate, which is too often discouraging for them. And it foils their reaching their goals. In this world, religion has a pretty spotty record when it comes to identifying and ministering to those who live with mental challenges. There are growing instances of true love and true acceptance. Yet some congregations model the same prejudices as the greater culture. And in this world, depending on a host of factors, loving those living with mental health challenges can be bewildering and soul draining and great, just as it is in the greater culture. In this world, these things are so. Amy Winehouse, Frank Lloyd Wright, Dennis Rodman, Johnny Cash, Neil Simon, Joan Rivers, Kurt Vonnegut, Mariah Carey. If you tuned in looking for some inner sunshine today, hang in there. We'll get to the hope side of all this in just a few. But first, some reflection. Looking back at my family tree, 2 uncles, 1 aunt, and 1 grandmother took their own lives. Note that I didn't use the phrase committed suicide, which denotes somehow a crime or a sin. And then a 5th, 1 more of my relatives made 3 attempts, none of which were completed. Then too, in all but the smallest congregations I've served, I've entered into verbal pacts, P-A-C-T-S, pacts, with a handful of parishioners. I say, call me if the monster gets too big for you and you have a plan in place to stop your pain. And unlike some of our ministry colleagues, so far none of the folks I have helped or tried to help have decided to end their lives. But that could change at any moment. In most of those cases, the sufferers were or are affected with related but separate conditions, things like substance abuse, post-traumatic stress, bulimia, rage episodes, anorexia, problem gambling, binge eating, predatory behaviors, poverty, sex and or porn addiction, overworking, serial or dysfunctional relationships, criminal behaviors, racism, violence, theological abuse, meaning long-term exposure to rigid belief systems used to control their bodies and their thoughts and their actions and their spirits, and of course, who they love. There's, of course, a broad range in all this. Some of these folks are able, notice the word, to engage the work of the world to handle the pressures, and others are simply not. Some are themselves now in the helping fields. Others need their energy just to get out of bed. Some of those folks are creative geniuses, and others need structure and routine. Some are in active recovery from one or more of these conditions, and others are caught in a death spiral. The point so far is having one or more mental challenges does not reduce us to some clinically necessary but oftentimes damning labels. They're depressed, you know. Yeah, she's schizophrenic. You know, he's just a drunk. That whole family is just a bunch of crackheads. All of them. That was not right in the head. And what they're saying is what? That these folks are not normal. Jane Pauley, Ariana Grande, Michael Phelps, Van Gogh, Carrie Fisher, Elton John, Buzz Aldrin, Jimi Hendrix, Robin Williams. Like I said, a little sunshine is in order here, but not the self-serving kind, the kind where we talk about mental challenges with our eyes and our ears wide open. Let me talk about that, and let's start with some thoughts from Kenny Wiley, the former senior editor of our denominational magazine, UU World. Reflecting on his own journey living with mental challenges, Wiley talks about how liberal religion has been a source for support. He writes, I was first diagnosed with clinical depression at age 13 after a spiral of anger and lethargy rendered my parents utterly baffled. I would rage on the tennis court against my father and most spectacularly against myself. I'd insult myself for hours on end, first under my breath and then in writing. Why didn't people understand how horrible I was? Continues. I've come to learn that such vicious self-talk is not entirely my fault. Understanding that depression is largely chemical disequilibrium, convincing myself deep down takes more work. Perhaps the toughest part of depression, both how it feels within and how it looks on the outside, is figuring out which parts or symptoms aren't my fault and for what I need to take responsibility. Next, Wiley talks about the role of community in moving from depression's victim to depression's survivor. He writes, my faith communities and close UU relationships have kept me alive. The story of my ultimate teammate, Bryce, just sitting next to me as I wept is only one example of how fellow Unitarian Universalists have been willing to simply sit with me. A person who refuses to give up on me shout out depression's mantra, that I am unworthy and I am unholy. Let me get that sentence right again. Fellow Unitarian Universalists have been willing to simply sit and be with me. A person who refuses to give up on me helps shout down depression's mantra that I am unworthy and unholy. And those who sit with us in hard times are saying through their actions that we are worthy of love. And then Wiley gives words to this ongoing struggle. My depression leads me toward comparison. I compare my current self with the self of 3 years ago, or a friend, or some unattainable goal. If I were a good person, I would call back faster. I would listen better. I'd be a better partner or friend. I'd be faster or thinner. And then Wiley winds down his article by reminding us of the rich but demanding traditions you and I have inherited. One more from Kenny Wiley. You are already good. You are already enough. Through songs and gestures and tear-filled hugs, I have been told that by Unitarian Universalism over and over again. Not always, of course. We do not always say it or live it. But at our best, that is who we are. We are the faith of you are already good. You are already enough. These are words not from theory, but from the valleys of liberal religion. Wiley reminds us there is a place where fog and rain hold sway. There's nothing polite or veneered by heady thoughts in that place. No time for skimming the existential surface of things. Either Unitarian Universalism saves and sustains us, or it's little more than a sunshine religion. So that's a pretty short version of what I'd like to say on this mental health awareness month. I ask you to hold all this to heart, whether you fit in the silly bounds of normal or not. And from our Universalist ancestors, I say this: know that there is a place in the world just for you. Know that you matter. Know that your struggles are not in vain, but your suffering is shared. Because normal is just a setting on a washing machine. Ellen DeGeneres, Beyonce, Lincoln, Charles Darwin, Marilyn Monroe, Woody Guthrie, Charles Dickens, Ray Charles, Shawn Mendes, David Letterman. Before we close, here's the question for the beloved conversations that will be part of our live programming at 11:30 a.m. on June 1. The question will be, once again, kind of a three-part. How have mental challenges affected you, others around you, or even the greater world? One more time. How have mental challenges affected you, those around you, or even the greater world? I hope you'll join us for those conversations and Stones of Compassion. Finally, I want to return to where we began today, hoping something good will somehow come of the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and all that's happening there in other cities. So our benediction comes to us from the late UU minister, Frederick Gillis. They will then be followed by the powerful song written and sung by 12-year-old Kedron Bryant. First, the closing words. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, let that be in and among us now and always.
I'm a young black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
Hello, I would just like to make a couple of corrections. So the link for the Stones of Compassion and Beloved Conversations actually goes out on Saturday. So be looking for that link on Saturday, and that's for the Sunday Beloved Conversations and Stones of Compassion. And so then the link for the Wednesday, Wonderful Wednesday, would actually go out on Tuesday. So be looking for that then. And last but definitely not least, the correct website for the Hendersonville Fellowship is uufhnc.org. Again, that is uufhnc.org. Y'all have a wonderful day.